All right, good morning. This is Tim Stewart. I'm president at Visual Decisions, and we're here today to talk about the smart factory landscape for small to mid-sized manufacturers. Just a quick note, at Visual Decisions, we've been in the business of utilizing information from the shop floor to improve operations since about 2002. We help our customers combine the smart factory with the lean factory to drive improvements to cost, throughput, and quality. Here's a quick summary of the smart factory landscape for small to mid-sized manufacturers. There are many unique challenges for smaller companies in general. They have the same issues as large manufacturers, but not nearly as many resources to address them. There are also fewer defined processes to take advantage of the new capabilities. And the cost for many solutions is unreasonable for smaller companies. We'll dive into more details on all of these challenges and more on future slides. We'll also review the smart factory solutions for small to mid-sized manufacturers. We'll take a look at the total solution space and what the different options are that are available. Then we'll take a look at some specific things around machine monitoring solutions, IoT and SCADA solutions, and connected worker platforms. Finally, we'll take a look at implementation strategies within smaller companies and look at some of the advantages that small companies have for getting quick value for their investment. And we'll also take a look at how to drive cultural adoption and overall value from these solutions. So let's dive in and look at some of the unique challenges for small to mid-sized manufacturers. So from a problem complexity standpoint, the general perception is often that small companies are less complex and that they have less complex problems, but that's not necessarily the case. By and large, small companies have the same issues as larger companies. They still have problems around machine availability, machine downtime, quality, employee turnover, and training, and supplier reliability, both from a delivery and a quality standpoint. And they still face a rapid fluctuations in demand in this ever-changing market that we face today. So the overall scale of the problems may be smaller when you look at small companies, but the scale of the problems per person or per plant is actually very similar to a larger company or a larger organization. While the problems may be very similar to the problems that larger companies face, the available resources to solve them are often much lower. And part of the issue is that without as many plants, the corporate organization is smaller for mid-sized companies, and that resource difference is even greater at small companies. So the support teams that can help with solving the different problems are smaller and more heavily burdened. This includes teams such as engineering, continuous improvement staff, the overall quality team, maintenance, IT participating in the projects, and even something like electrical technicians to do PLC programming. Staffing projects can also run into issues when implementing smart factory solutions. For example, who actually owns the project and who's the long-term owner of the solution, and do they have time to actually participate in these projects and so forth? And for the overall people that are participating in the project, they're probably covering multiple roles already. So how do you free up time for those people to participate in these implementations? There can also be process challenges associated with these for smaller organizations. A large company like Toyota has the Toyota production system. But for smaller organizations, there may not be that well-defined production system or improvement process to take advantage of the new capabilities that smart factory solutions are providing. So essentially, a lot of these smart factory solutions are like a Fitbit for the shop floor. And unfortunately, I wish it were the case, but wearing a Fitbit doesn't automatically make you thin. And putting these solutions in place doesn't automatically remove the waste from the shop floor either. You actually need to do something with the data that they're providing in order to drive that value. So if you don't have that strong lean or operational excellence practice already in place, it may not be as easy to get the benefits as if you had that large overall lean organization that supported process improvement. So it's something to keep in mind as you're looking at these different solutions. Also, the smart factory system implementations can represent a much higher percentage of revenues for smaller companies. So the potential payback is obviously smaller when revenues and costs aren't as large. There just aren't as many benefits to be had overall. So the investment needs to be scaled for company size, revenues, and cost per facility and so forth. But while those costs per facility can be similar to the larger companies, it may be more difficult to amortize the investment when you don't have as many overall plants and so forth in the organization. So the overhead of the projects, you don't get the economies of scale that you get when you have 60 different plants in a very large company. So the other factor here is that the discounts that large companies get simply may not be available for smaller companies when you're not buying the same volume from the vendor. And one last point, the total costs need to be considered, and that includes software, hardware, hosting, external services for implementation, companies, consultants, et cetera, and then also the internal resource usage. And so the cost of these things can add up quickly for some of those systems that the larger organizations are using. So let's take a look at that solution space and what solutions are available for the small and mid-sized manufacturers. So first of all, a quick note on the solutions themselves. Expensive does not necessarily mean better. More expensive solutions generally have more features available within them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a better fit for your particular situation. As far as smart factory solutions go, there are a lot of different types of solutions, and each one of those is designed to address different types of problems that may exist within your operations. So the real key here is to understand what it is that drives performance within your environment, and then map those issues to the different solutions that are out there so you can make sure that whatever you select is going to best address those problems in your business. So diving down into the solutions themselves, let's start with machine monitoring. That's kind of the basics of smart factory for many companies. And these solutions address a very well-defined problem. They look at the current state of the equipment that's running. Is it currently running? Is it not running? How many pieces has it produced? And what are the different reasons for the performance? There's a pretty straightforward workflow to drive improvements using this information. The applications are typically pretty well structured out of the box with a reasonably straightforward way to get at the data and to use it to identify what needs to change in the process. So this means that you can drive significant improvements in environments where machine availability either constrains delivery to the customer or drives up the costs within the organization. And the good news is that there are very high quality solutions in this area that are actually priced very aggressively for small and mid-sized manufacturers. And the implementation time of those solutions can also be very fast. I've had a customer go live with one of these solutions recently in a small organization in literally a day and a half to start collecting data and be able to use it to drive improvements. So that helps keep down the cost of those external services and so forth to implement the solution. And these systems also tend to be relatively low maintenance once they're installed. So that helps to reduce the future burden of external consulting time or internal consulting time or internal time to maintain and extend those different solutions. And they also typically don't require much IT or development involvement or support over the long term. Next are IoT and SCADA systems. IoT stands for the Internet of Things, and these platforms are much like the machine monitoring solutions, but are much more general purpose. They can connect to any type of device on the shop floor and collect just about any type of data from that process. But they need to be programmed to interpret the information that's coming from those devices and be able to utilize it to help drive a workflow to make improvements. And so while these platforms address a really large variety of problems on the shop floor, because of their flexibility, they require considerably more expertise and service time to implement. There's a really good fit in some environments where there are shop floor data challenges beyond machine monitoring that can provide a lot of value for the organization, but you have to look at that fit on a case-by-case basis. And now, depending on the vendor within this category, the feature set of the solution and the cost for the solution can vary greatly. There are lower cost solutions such as inductive automation that are approachable for many small and mid-sized manufacturers. The solution space of potential applications within these different solutions can also vary greatly because the feature set of the solutions themselves differs quite a bit from vendor to vendor. The problems that they can address are also very different. Another issue with these types of systems is that the system maintenance can be high. To expand the solution to cover additional machines or additional devices, such as sensors and so forth, can require extensive development or programming or configuration in order to accommodate that new device into the overall model. And they also require significantly more IT and or development support to get them up and running and then sustain them over the long term. The final category that I'll dive into today is connected worker platforms or some other systems that look specifically at manual operations. This set of solutions focus more on worker connectivity and the activity workers are performing than they do focusing in on the machines themselves. These types of solutions can be very valuable environments with manual operations or where standard work is critical to the operations. This can include connected worker platforms such as Tulip or video AI systems such as Drishti that record the manual operations and automatically detect deviations from standard work. The different features available and the pricing in this category vary even more greatly based on the vendor and the capabilities of the systems themselves. And the value that the system generates also depends greatly on the adoption and the usage. And that's especially true for cases where the solutions that focus on connected workers and an adherence to standard work and work instruction delivery, things like that. Because these types of cases, the whole point of them is to get people to behave differently. So you have to have that very, very broad adoption of these solutions in order to receive that value for those use cases. These types of solutions and use cases can also require a great deal of inputs into the system for either delivering work instructions out to the workers or looking at what that standard work is in the first place so that that can be made available within those systems. Next, let's look at some of the different implementation strategies and how to use the smaller scale of your organization to your advantage when compared to larger companies. First off, as mentioned earlier, these systems, especially in the case of machine monitoring and IoT systems, is much like wearing a Fitbit, where it doesn't automatically cause you to lose weight. You actually have to utilize the information from these systems in order to drive those improvements. So one of the steps in implementing these solutions is to adapt your operational excellence or lean practice or continuous improvement practice in order to take advantage of the new capabilities that these systems provide. Now, I've done a lot of other webinars and articles on this topic, so I'm not going to dive into the details today, but just know that this needs to be performed in order to really achieve the maximum value with these solutions. If you have questions, please reach out to me or look at some of my other articles and so forth for more details. The basics of cultural adoption are the same for the implementation of any new technology, but some of these smart factory systems offer unique methods of adoption that I'll get into in a bit. For now, let's just cover the basics. Fundamental change management applies here as much as in any project. If you're looking for a reference that handles the basics well, the work by John Cotter, Leading Change, etc., works well here. Building habits within the organization is another key. BJ Fogg's model on habits is fantastic and highly recommended for everyone. Fundamentally, his equation for behavior is, I'll get into it on the next slide. So more to come. Overcoming Big Brother is a key concern in many of these projects. You have to know that people love visibility going downwards, but people don't necessarily like being monitored. And so you have to let people know that the system is not getting used to beat them up. It's being used to make their life easier in general. And finally, people have to participate throughout the implementation in order to get their buy-in on the solution. And again, more on that in coming slides. So when we look at how to gain that ownership, how to get that involvement and really partake in these processes, you have to involve the people in that implementation before the event, during the event, afterwards, across different shifts, across different rotations. Treat them as the owner within this process, or at least some part of the process. And as you're implementing these systems, think through the human that's at the center of this and how it's going to impact them, and build your designs and so forth of the systems and the processes in order to really help them feel comfortable as they move forward. I can't emphasize enough how important communication is within all this. You have to make sure that the vision is clear, that everyone knows the role and everybody knows the purpose here. So in terms of the benefits, people have to understand the benefits, not only to the overall organization and how you're trying to improve profits and so forth, but they have to understand at a personal level how it's going to impact them and why they really want to do this. If they don't understand the vision, if they don't understand the benefits and so forth, if they don't know their role, they're going to revert to what they're comfortable with, it, which was probably what they do today. And so they're not going to drive, you're not going to get that adoption. They're not going to utilize the solution to drive those improvements. I lied, it wasn't the next slide, it was a couple slides down, but BJ Fogg's model is essentially that behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. And one of the benefits of a smaller organization is that you don't have to turn as big of a ship to make some of these changes. And so it can be easier for management to be tied into the people on the shop floor, the different support groups and so forth, and to help to manage those motivations for those people, whether it's internal or external. And then from an ability and prompt perspective, that's where these systems can really help, is that you're essentially expanding the capabilities or the abilities of your people. And so these systems can really help with that portion of it. But even more than that, they can really help as triggers to prompt the behaviors that you're trying to instill in the shop floor. And so when you think about the daily habits of people, what they do on a daily basis, if you can prompt those things and give them those timely notifications and so forth, reminders, and get them into those behaviors, it can really help the overall value for the organization. Next couple slides are really on locking in the changes on the shop floor and setting those new habits properly. So in addition to the things I just talked about, you have to clearly define the standard work around all of these things. And that's true not just for the people on the shop floor, it's for the support teams as well. So all of those new processes, new ways of solving problems, et cetera, have to be clearly defined and well communicated so that people understand how they're supposed to do their jobs, incorporating these new capabilities into that process. And you have to think about this over the long term, because there's a natural entropy that takes place or drift in these different processes. And it takes energy, a continuous input of energy, to maintain the same level of order. There's always new products coming through, new workers, people moving within the organization, and cross-training taking place. And so it's very important to continually have, energy going into this, ongoing training, looking at this information and asking questions about the information that's being provided, and having management really continue to utilize it themselves in order to drive that involvement. And kind of hammering it home, but it's important to standardize and control that process and build up that standard work around it, make it visible, document the standards, provide real-time feedback, et cetera. Try to make it error-proof, whatever process you're putting in place. Automate the error detection and so forth to be able to have less reliance on people in the process. And then utilize these systems to kind of leave the lights on, so to speak, so that you can track deviations from that new standard and reinforce training where it's appropriate. And finally, it's important to recognize that you may need to skill up your workforce as part of this whole process. And implementing the systems may require new skills within the workforce. And that can be done by training your existing staff, hiring people from outside the organization, or bringing in outside help to get that training accomplished. And my strong recommendation is to utilize people that are experts in the process, whether that's me or whether that's anybody else. But work with a team that's kind of been there and done that to get those initial successes underneath your belt. And during that same time, have people that will own the system over the long term, work with that outside team to develop their own ability to take ownership and run with the solution, so you don't have to pay the consultants forever. That's it for today. So just in summary, while small and mid-sized manufacturers face many kind of unique challenges when compared to the larger organizations, they do have some advantages for being able to ramp up quickly and consistently. There are many different smart factory solutions that are a great fit for small and mid-sized companies, and the selection should be driven by the problems within the organization and the best fit for solving those issues. And if you have questions, please reach out to me. I'm available here on LinkedIn. I'm available online. I'm pretty easy to reach. So that's it for today's webinar. In the coming weeks, we'll be covering a number of great topics on our webinar Wednesdays. I'll post notices here on LinkedIn. You can also go to the Visual Decisions website to register for them directly on the Zoom platform where I'm actually hosting all of this. So with that said, Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again in future weeks.